Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by the beautiful writing, producing, and directing partners, Katrina Kudlick and Mercedes Bryce Morgan. Ladies, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
You know, it's such an honor to have you. When you guys agreed to do this, I was super stoked. I've been so ready to do this ever since, and especially not just because I'm a fan of the work. They've worked together on such projects as one of my favorite titles ever in the history of film, Come Fuck My Robot, as well as Fixation, among many others. So what can you guys tell us about the work you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, so we love genre pieces. We really love horror. We really love thrillers. And Katrina and I have just been working together for many years. Fixation, which you mentioned, is a feature that we did this past year and
during COVID
in
Canada.
It was a really wild experience, and we're in post-production for that right now. And basically, like, our ideal day is waking up and watching a horror movie and going to bed and watching a horror movie. And so we just want to keep living our life that way.
That's so awesome. And the fact that you guys are partners in everything that you do is super incredible. And I love it. I love the fact that you guys can share all this and you're willing to do stuff like this with me is super incredible. So for those of you that don't know, I probably should have said at the beginning, Mercedes is on the left for me. It might be on the right for you guys. She's in the beautiful flannel. And then Katrina is got the amazing hair that I'm jealous of. So do you guys have any projects that you're working on or that you got coming out soon that you can talk about that aren't completely under wraps? Or
got a lot of things that we're working on.
Yeah.
I mean, the feature version of Come Fuck My Robot is something that we're working on right now, which we're really, really excited about. Fixation, which you already mentioned, is in post. We have the last 3 weeks of post to finish up right now, which is really wild and exciting. It's been a crazy COVID journey, but we're excited to put that one out into the real world.
Yeah, and then we have a horror feature which we can't talk about yet,
yes,
but that's also coming up for us.
Yeah, excited to shoot that this summer.
Yeah.
Any updates that you get, please hit me up and let me know. I'll be happy to share them. But all of you, you don't have to wait for me because I have these beautiful ladies' social media right down here in the description. So make sure you're giving them a follow on social media, not just to support them, but so you can get any news or updates as they happen. So we know what you guys are doing in the future and what you're doing right now. But ladies, I would like to take it back to the past and talk about where horror started for you, the first horror movies that you watched. Katrina, let's start with you. Your first horror movie was?
The Wicker Man. So I kind of grew up with not that much horror in my life until about like 13 years old. And my aunt was like, we're going to go up to the attic and watch like a whole weekend of horror movies. So my mind was like blown that weekend. We watched a ton of classics, but The Wicker Man is one of the first ones that I watched that like really, really stuck with me. I think that like anything that is like rooted in human horror, things that like can really happen, always has scared me a lot more than anything else, even though I love all different types of horror. And that's definitely something that we incorporate in a lot of our work is the human horror, the scariness of the brain.
People can argue with me all they want. This totally is a horror musical, and I think it's the best musical ever. Like, I have people argue it, but this is totally a musical to me, and I love The Wicker Man, and it's one of those movies that obviously, I'm not talking about Nicolas Cage head in a beehive. We're talking about the original Wicker Man. For those of you that haven't seen it, there is going to be spoilers here. So if you haven't seen it, you should check it out if you haven't seen it by now. It's one of those endings that the first time you see it, it really blows your mind.
Yeah, totally.
Horror has always had a good way of doing twists, even, back with Psycho, and they've always had a good way of interpreting twists into movies. And this is one that really, really nails it. I love the front cover, the Citizen Kane of horror films. That is the perfect explanation of The Wicker Man. Another thing I'm really excited about that I didn't mention at the beginning, but I have done neither of these movies on the podcast yet. But in order for you guys to know what the second one is, I got to bounce over to Mercedes. So Mercedes, your first horror movie was?
Freaks. Yes.
Man, and what's so funny is for anybody out there that hasn't seen Freaks, I guarantee you there's a scene we're going to talk about that all of you know. Even if you don't know it's from the movie Freaks, you guys know this scene. So Mercedes, how old were you the first time that you had seen Freaks?
I think I was about like 13 when I watched Freaks, so about Katrina's age. But yeah, I think it's like what's cool is like it is truly a classic movie, and I think it's something so special. Something hasn't been quite made like it since. I mean, like American Horror Story has obviously done like an ode to it, and everyone references it all the time. But yeah, the scene which we're going to talk about is something I don't think anyone can forget once they watch it.
No. I'm glad you brought that up, because with American Horror Story, for those of you that are American Horror Story fans that have never seen Freaks, Pepper was directly influenced from Freaks. And her character is a direct influence from the movie Freaks, as you guys just seen over top of this. But it's that homage that is just so amazing. And Kurt Cobain said it best. This is something I always liken back to. Kurt Cobain, the singer of Nirvana, said that he knew they made it big when Weird Al Yankovic called to do a parody of their song. He said, when that happened, we knew that we were doing something right. And I've always felt that. And, you know, with American Horror Story, so many years later, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Freaks was 1939. So for all these years later, American Horror Story to still have that much of an influence from Freaks, to put Pepper in there as a direct homage to that show, shows that Freaks did something right even back then. And it's a movie you watch now, because I always go back and rewatch these movies before we talk about them. It's filled with horror, and it's filled with heartbreak and sadness, and there's laughs, you know, like it's one of those movies that for 1939, you still watch it and it holds up. It's one of those movies where you have so many different emotions as you go. So ladies, I'm going to bounce these questions back and forth off you. Let's start first with this time with you, Mercedes. Which scene was it from Freaks that affected you the most?
It's the "We accept them, one of us."
Google gobble, one of us, one of us. Google gobble, Google gobble.
What's so great about it is like the monsters and Freaks are switched from the very beginning, and so I think what's so awesome is it's such an older movie, but it did that before. Now it's like we're all about anti-heroes now, but that movie started out with that. And like why I've always loved horror is because I love like acceptance of the other, right? It's like all of these subcultures, and like I love the subculture that loves horror. Like those are the type of people I connect with so much. And so like that movie is all about like accepting the other and feeling like outsiders, but really bonding together over that. And so I think like that for me was like really, really impactful in that way, because it's emotional even more than it is like necessarily scary.
And you can even make the argument that Freaks is a love story. Yeah, I mean, like it's totally a love story when you get down to it. It is a horror notebook. I mean, essentially, you know, like, and it's funny because I haven't seen Freaks since I was, you know, probably 11 or 12 years old. But, you know, going back and rewatching, it's one of those things where there's so many things I fell in love with on a rewatch. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to get the Blu-ray or DVD here in time for the episode, but I will have it here soon. And I'm so excited to try to see any type of special features or anything, if they have them, that I can find out about the making of this movie and see, because I think this would be a hard movie to make today.
Yeah.
I think that it's something with the times that we live in now. I don't think it would be as accepted as it was back then, but it's just the changing of the guard, the changing of the times. We can watch it now and know it's entertainment. But it's amazing to me that this being a first horror movie for somebody, I'm surprised you still watch movies at all. Like this movie would have scared the shit out of me if this was, because like you said, it's that human aspect. There's no real monster in this movie, but it's the perception of what people think a monster is, especially back then for the freak shows and stuff. People interpreted that as a monster back then, and for them to really tackle that in this movie is amazing. And like you said, they're the anti-heroes almost in this movie.
Yeah, definitely. And if anything, now it's like, okay, would this movie be able to be made now because everyone is so conscious? Like, I argue the point that like this movie is extra conscious of that, but I think it's like people truly understanding it. It's like this movie is like breaking down what people think about like social constructs. And so even though it's not something that could be made now, I think it's something that should be made now.
Should be. Yes, I completely agree, because we are tearing down those walls, the LGBTQ community, you know, the police brutality, the Black Lives Matter. We're starting to tear all these things down. And we're starting to realize that whether you're white, black, gay, straight, Christian, Muslim, if I cut you, it's red. It doesn't matter. And it's all about love, and it's all about how you treat other people. I just said this on an episode a couple of days ago, but you have maybe 100 years on this planet if you're lucky. And if you want to spend that hating people because of the decisions that they make, that really says more about you than the people that you hate. So you in 100 years, you might as well just love as much as you can. Yeah, that's all you got to do is love and treat people with respect, because you're not going to be here that long.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
Hell yeah.
80 years of love would be great.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If I make it, I'm 35. If I make it to 50, I'm going to be high-fiving every single person that I see. Just walking everywhere. Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Hey, I'm still alive. This is awesome.
Yeah, 50 years of love for you.
Yeah.
So, Katrina, I'm going to bounce back to you now. The Wicker Man is a movie, like I said, that is it's so impactful that it's become the remake, an unintentional comedy that people more make fun of. So the Wicker Man legacy has more been bogged down by what they did with that remake. But let me ask you, when you think of the Wicker Man, and I'm talking about the original, not because every time I ask anybody this, it's always Nicolas Cage head in a beehive. What is the first thing that pops in your head when you think of the Wicker Man?
Oh, I mean, and I'm going to spoil everything. I'm sorry. But it's the ending, from like finding out that like he was on this island to find this young girl, and then he sees her and finds her, and then the reveal that every single person has been playing him essentially. And I like that you call it a musical too, because I think that one could argue that it's quite a campy movie. And that's really all of the musical fun of it, which I really enjoy. Like, I'm a huge fan of camp, so bring it on. I actually haven't seen the Nicolas Cage version because I refuse to.
Good call. Look, I'm not the type of person, I don't bash anything, and I'm not one of those people that go into remakes thinking that they are inherently bad. So one of my favorite movies ever is Evil Dead 2013. I think it's a brilliant, amazing remake. But when you take a movie as genuine and amazing and original as The Wicker Man, and you try to remake it with all these, they failed on so many different levels. And there's great actors in it. There was great writing behind it. There was great direction, but some things just shouldn't be remade, and this is one of them. And the way they tried to remake it, it fell flat for me personally.
Yeah, I mean, and just to clarify too, like, it's more for me, like, there's certain movies that just like hit me in a certain way where I'm like, I don't know if I ever want to see that movie again because it was so impactful. Like, it's like when another oddly horror movie is like the first time I saw a Ghost Story, I was like, well, that was terrifying.
It's the scariest movie that both of us agree that's the scariest movie we've ever seen.
Yeah, it's just like our mortality was just like, whew. And I don't know if I could ever see it again, even though I consider it one of my favorite movies. So, with that said, I think, the ending was like really effective to me because I'm a huge fan of any paranoid movie, like all of the paranoia of the 70s. Loved that. Very, very inspired and brought up on those flicks. So that's, I guess, another reason that I like The Wicker Man. The other thing that I find really, really exciting about it from like a horror perspective is like the idea of like these swapped like ideologies. Like, I love movies where like one side believes a strong ideology and the other one is one, and like the horror is actually just that they disagree on the way to like, see the world and like interact with the world. And so like, obviously, like us, we're following our main guy, and everyone on the island is terrifying to him because they have a different way of thinking. I'm not saying we should go burn anyone at all. No one should follow the advice of what happens in The Wicker Man. But that being said, like, it's still a really, really interesting movie to me because it's just different ideologies at play.
You're also kind of heartbroken at the end. Like,
totally.
Oh, I've been rooting for this guy, and that's a terrible way to go.
Yeah, it sounds awful.
Nothing about that.
I agree. Yeah.
So, Mercedes, I'm going to bounce back to you now. When you think of freaks, what is the first thing that pops into your head?
Oh, the first thing that pops in my head. Oh, it's seeing real people like play the roles. I think like everything now, it's like, even with like American Horror Story, because we brought it up, it's VFX, and it's like effects that are done. And I think that like now, even if they were to remake Freaks, I wonder if they would actually go out and find real people to play the parts. And I think that's like so special to capture that in such like a specific way. That's what I think.
Right. Yeah. See, and I think I'm one of these people that I want you to choose the best actor for the role. I can't remember who it was. They were doing, I think it was Kristen Stewart. And they asked her, how do you feel about straight people playing gay characters? And she was like, well, I can't be upset about that because who's to say that a gay person can't play a straight character in a movie? You know, you use the best actor for the role. Now, for a movie like Freaks, I think I would go against my own ideology there, and I would want them to cast people. And please don't think I'm calling these people freaks, guys. That's not what I'm doing. That's not in my heart. That's not my integrity. But I would want them to choose people with these disabilities to play these roles because I know that they could get people that could nail these type of roles now.
Totally. And like, just to speak to that too, it's like if anyone watches the movie, like the whole point of the title is I feel like the quote normal people are the freaks.
Yes.
Come to the conclusion of the movie. So yeah.
Whatever.
That's the total twist to this movie. I like the normal people.
Normal people.
Yeah.
So Katrina, I'm going to bounce back to you. We talked about with the Wicker Man, what you first think of, but what would you say your favorite scene from the Wicker Man is?
Oh, there's so many good ones. I mean, other than the ending, like all of the songs are really fantastic. Seeing like the naked women dance around when he's like walking through that estate, and like you'll know what I mean. Go watch the movie. I'm just gonna leave it at naked women dancing around and let the audience figure that out.
Oh, trust me, 12-year-old Kenny still thinks about that scene all the time.
Of course, yeah, it sticks in your mind. Or like even like I'm forgetting the name of her character, but her singing through the wall when he's trying to sleep and him going, that sticks in your mind too.
Oh yeah. And this is a movie that has many scenes. And like I said, a lot of these I can't do clips of, guys. I'm sorry, but because of nudity and because of copyright, I can't play music and I can't show titties. Trust me, I'm just as disappointed about it as you guys are, but I can't do it. Well, now we talked about the Wicker Man and we talked about Freaks, but now I'm going to flip this on its head a little bit. And this time I'm going to start first with you, Katrina. We talked about your first horror movie, but now I want to go scream on you for a second. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh, that's so hard because there's so many different types.
And Mercedes gets to cheat now because she gets to think a little bit while you have to answer.
Fighting my time.
I mean, we did just say A Ghost Story was like the scariest that we've seen. Let's see. I want to cheat and say multiple, but that seems like that's not fair now, is it? I mean, I think that like, there are so many different types of horror that it's hard for me to like break it down into one, because being a fan of like, especially like any genre filmmaking, there's like horror comedy, and I'm just avoiding the question. There's horror comedy, and you know, like there's something like The Wicker Man, or there's something like Goodnight Mommy, and like there's stuff like Scream, and you know, those are all so different to me.
If you need more time, I can answer.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to give two. I think one is like the most like influential one, because it's like choosing your favorite child. Like I can't choose my favorite child. That's
I hate all my kids too. I get it.
Like, influential one to me recently is Hereditary, because like Katrina mentioned, it's like, I think that, you know, like that movie is supernatural, but like it's what the people do is truly horrifying. And so it's like a drama in the form of a horror movie. And so that really affected me a lot. And then something that I would classify as a horror movie that I think other people don't, but I think has the same effect, is 8th Grade. Because I was on the edge of my seat the entire time watching that, and it gave me like the same feeling as watching a horror movie. So
Horror is so subjective. I think horror is the hardest genre to nail down, because there isn't, for me, for it to be sci-fi, you have to have something futuristic or spacey. For it to be a comedy, you have to make me laugh. But with horror, you can't say, well, it's got to have kills. I mean, The Lion King has kills. Bambi has kills. You know, it's really hard. I got to be scared. The Day After Tomorrow scared the shit out of me. And I don't consider that a horror movie, essentially. You know, so I mean, to me, it's really hard to nail down what is horror. And that's why I like doing this, because horror is so subjective. I have people that come on here and talk about Jurassic Park as their first horror movie. Hell yeah, that's a horror movie. That Velociraptor is a total slasher. Like when he's got his little claws wrapping around that door, like it's slasher, total slasher. Real quick though, when you were talking about Hereditary, one of the most intense scenes in my life, we were at the movie theater when that movie came out. We went opening night, and when the car scene happened, like you felt the wind just leave that whole just everybody was totally. Like nobody had any idea that was going to happen, and we're all just looking at each other like, no fucking way that just happened.
Yeah.
And
it's so early.
Toni Collette is such a
Okay.
goddess.
Yeah, when that happened, because we watched it together in the theater, we turned towards each other and we go,
Yeah.
yeah, because they build up her character so much, and that's what's so great about it is because you're like, did they do that? Like,
Totally.
yeah, they just did that.
Such an amazing scene.
Those are great. I'm gonna say two too. So to bounce off of that, Ari, fantastic. I'm gonna say Midsommar too.
Midsommar.
It was scary. You actually reminded me of it. It was scary specifically because we watched it and there was an earthquake in the theater while we were watching it. So if you remember like the break into Act 2 when the camera is like turning upside down as they're entering like the new world, the whole theater shook. And everyone in the theater, because we're in LA, everyone in the theater like stood up and like we all like two people like ran out and everyone like looked at each other and we're like, are we supposed to be like running out?
And
it's
it
like
broke the fourth wall.
Yeah.
When you're in a movie, you're not supposed to look at people, and everyone in the audience turns around and stares at each other.
Staring at each other. And it's like the funniest thing is that we all like look at each other and then like everyone starts laughing and then we sit back down and watch the rest of the movie.
Watching the movie instead of saying Bryce, because we're like, well, if we're gonna die, we might as well like keep watching movies.
Exactly, which
we're
is
gonna die with you, Ari Aster.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the last thing we see, man. A24, let's go.
It's a compliment. And I remember like leaving that movie and being like, wow, that was a long movie and I could have sat in it for like a whole 24 hours. Like just like the tone probably says a lot about me. But like the tone of it was like so enticing and filled with so many different like elements that I like really like look for in horror, that I was really enjoying it. And it's like maybe my favorite breakup movie of all time.
And it's funny because I really think that if The Wicker Man was made today, it would be an A24 film. It would be an Ari Aster film. I mean, you can see Wicker Man influence on Hereditary and Midsommar. I mean, those are two movies that you could really see the Wicker Man influence on. So I think it's so ironic that that's your first horror movie. And then we're talking about these movies that are almost modern day versions of what the Wicker Man could be. So I just think it's funny how that full circle comes into effect. Definitely.
Yeah. And then my other one was We Need to Talk About Kevin, because I remember, which is also like, you know, one of those horror movies that like some people might say that it's more of a drama. It terrified me when I first watched it. Like the idea, I remember that when Ramsey said that like something along the lines, and I'm butchering her words now, but something along the lines of like she wanted to like look at the horror of a mother who, you know, didn't trust or really love her child. And that really enticed me to go watch it. I'm like, what does that look like? And it's pretty terrifying, and it held up as like something that I like reference all the time when I think about movies. So that would be another one of my favorites.
That's awesome. And we need to talk about Kevin. That's another one that, to me, movies about parents and kids, it's different now. I have 3 kids. I have a 13-year-old boy, an 8-year-old daughter, and a 1-year-old daughter. And I look at, like, I always liken it back to The Exorcist. The way I felt when I watched The Exorcist as a child is completely different than how I watch The Exorcist now as a father of a little girl. As a kid, you're like, fuck that, just burn the house down, kill that bitch, I don't give a shit. You know, now I'm a dad and I have a little girl, and I'm like, you know, I couldn't leave her side. You know, I would do whatever I could to try to get this Pazuzu out of her. And so and We Need to Talk About Kevin's one of those movies where, how do you relate to something like that as a parent? You know?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like, I guess you don't have like the justification of being like, it's just split pea soup that she's vomiting, she's fine.
But that's also cool of like watching movies again at like different points in your life. It's like, especially like, you know, horror movies about like parents and their kids. Like, it's cool watching something as a kid and then watching it as an adult and seeing how you relate to it differently.
Yeah.
It's like, we love to rewatch movies at different points in our life. It's like the movie hasn't changed, but like how we change.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's like always like one of those things with art where it's like when you're, you know, when you're 10 years old and your parents are bringing you to a museum and you see some squiggly lines like on a painting and they're like standing there like really like Ferris Buellering it and thinking about it, and you're like, what are you talking about? I could make that. And then like you grow up and you like look at it and you can see like that there's like so much more in it. I feel like that's the same thing with like movies over time, where you're like, sometimes when you're a kid, you're like, it just completely goes over you and you're like, I don't care about this. Like, I don't find this like interesting. But then there's some movies that you watch as a kid that you're like, this is like the most gripping thing ever.
Yeah.
And you watch it as an adult and you're like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Like people who watch Star Wars as like adults for the first time instead of kids, like it's different.
It
different
is.
Yeah.
But that's like the magic of it, right? That it's
Yeah.
like a form that like kind of like moves throughout time. So it's not like saying that something's good and bad. It's just like, how effective is it for you? And that's like emotional and in terms of what it makes you think.
Well, and it's human nature, you know, because we're always getting smarter and evolving. You know, I'm 35, and it's funny because I'm like, man, when I was 30, I didn't know shit. I was a fucking idiot. Now I got the world by the balls. And when I was 30, I was like, man, when I was 25, I didn't know shit. But now, yeah, I'm sure when I'm 40, I'll be like, man, when I was 35, I didn't know shit. But now I got to figure it out. You know, and us as people, as we change and evolve, our tastes change and evolve, and the way that we look at certain things, even because of the way that things happen to us in our real life experiences, change the way that we look at film and the way that we look at different things in the world. So it is fun to go back and revisit these movies. And the reason I wanted to talk about the first horror movie that we watched is I always compare it to drugs. And it's like, you get that. I don't condone drug use, throwing that out there. But you do drugs for the first time and you get that high, and then you're constantly chasing that dragon. And the same thing with horror movies. You get that fear and you're always chasing that again. You always want more, 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 more. And with horror, it's so special and important to us that we're willing to spend our days dressing up like Freddy Krueger and going out to a con to meet people. You don't get people dressing up like Ryan Gosling from The Notebook to go out and, you know, meet people. You know, it's just, that's what horror means to us. And the horror community is so kind and so sweet. I mean, I've talked to people that have ripped people's arms off in movies, and then they come here and they're like, hey, the nicest guy, sweetest guy ever. Like, please don't put a nailed in baseball bat in the back of my head, you know, like, and so, and I meet these people and you realize how truly inspirational and sweet and kind the horror community is. So to have you guys on here with me really, truly means a lot to me. I got one more question for you before I let you go. We go back to the first horror movie you watched. So with Katrina, we're going back to the Wicker Man. Mercedes, we're going back to Freaks. We're ranking it on a skull count, 0 being the worst and 5 being the best. We're not being critics, and we're not judging it on acting ability, score, anything like that. Just strictly on what this movie means to you and how much it affected you. So 0 to 5 skulls, and you can use half or quarter skulls. Let's start with you this time, Mercedes. With Freaks, you can be 0.
5, definitely. I think like for me, like a movie that's like deserves a 5 is something that is like, so it changes my life after I watch it. So I'm a different person than I was if I had not. And it's something that's like very current to the times, but is like timeless and will forever like inspire people. And so for me, it does all of those things.
Yeah. That's, I mean, like I said, a lot of people love their first horror movie. I have people that hate their first horror movie. I had a guy on here that I'm not going to say his name, but he wouldn't sleep on his bed if it had sheets on it after you'd watched Nightmare on Elm Street because of Rod's death with the sheet. I mean, like, it can affect us in totally different ways. But let's bounce this back over to you, Katrina. What would your ranking of the Wicker Man be? 0 to 5 skulls.
I would say 4, because I think it could have had a lasting emotional impact for me.
Okay.
But I think that it's like something that I still think about all of the time. And so for me, that's like very, very valuable.
Yeah. And again, guys, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, make sure you are following these ladies. All their information is down here in the description. Follow them on social media so you can get the updates directly from them. Ladies, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.